Hi everybody, my name is Victoria. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be starting something new on my channel. My plan is to do some music wrap-ups, but seasonally, because music is a really big part of the media that I consume. It's kind of a big thing in my life. So I just wanted to have a little outlet for it. I know this is a book channel technically, and so this may not be content for everyone. If you're not interested in it, that's okay. But hopefully some of you who are more avid musical listeners will get something from these videos. So today I'm going to talk about the music that I was listening to throughout spring, and I'm counting spring as March, April, May. So those are the months we're looking at. On Spotify, every month I make a list of music. I make a playlist of things that I want to listen to in that month. So I actually make monthly playlists every single month. And I found that method just kind of helps me keep track of artists that are new to me, and also helps me to organize some of the artists who are my favorites and that I listen to all the time. I definitely have artists that repeat themselves over and over throughout the months because I can't get enough of them. I'm going to try to talk about the music that I've listened to by genre, but you'll find that I'm kind of very loosely doing that as well, just because I listen to some like subgenres of things. Enough blabbing for me though, let's talk about music. The first genre I want to talk about is rock, pop rock, hard rock, metal. There's going to be a bunch of different things in this genre. But first, I want to talk about a band that my husband introduced me to called Unprocessed. Unprocessed would be considered progressive metal, and this band is really appealing to me because I really like the metal genre, but I don't tend to like a lot of music with screaming, and so this is a very melodic band. I love the lead singer's voice so much, and I know just by listening to this band that they're amazing musicians, so that's definitely been a really great discovery. The next band I want to talk about is JUKEBOX the Ghost. I've been listening to them kind of on and off. I would describe them as piano-driven rock. They're definitely a little bit more on the pop side, and I've really been enjoying their newer album that they put out. It's got like a very Queen feel. It just reminds me a lot of Queen, and it must be that piano rock feel of it, but it's also their songwriting, and they don't take themselves seriously all the time, and I just really love that. The next band that I was listening to is actually Pearl Jam, because they released a new album called Gigaton, and it's pretty decent. I actually enjoyed their new album a lot. I know nothing is gonna really compare to old Pearl Jam, but this new album of theirs really has some decent tracks. There's also some tracks that were kind of generic, kind of boring, so I definitely didn't love every track on this album, but if you're a Pearl Jam fan at all, it's worth noting that they're still making music and they have a 2020 release, so there you go. Next, for some reason, I started listening to My Chemical Romance again, and I'm not sure exactly what brought that out. Maybe it was Michael Nipp's Twilight videos, but for whatever reason, I started listening to My Chemical Romance again and had a really great time. At one point in my life, I was listening to this band a lot, and it was just really fun to listen to them again. One of my favorite bands of all time, Relient K, released a new live album, and so I've been enjoying listening to that as well. And then the last band that I will kind of put in this genre is Coldplay. Coldplay has a new album, and it's pretty decent. Did you know that Coldplay was still making music? They are. And it's a pretty decent album. I've been enjoying exploring their music again. I kind of forgot about Coldplay, and then they popped up on my Spotify as having released a new album. Actually, it's a double album. There's a lot of tracks on this album. I've always appreciated Coldplay's reason for making music and their concepts behind their albums, and the concept behind this newer album is humanity and just humans all being together and being connected and working together. And so I always enjoy their ideas behind the music that they're creating. Next up, let's talk about some soul R&B type of artists. I love Lianne La Havas, and recently she's been putting out a few singles, a few new things. She just has the most beautiful voice. If you're not familiar with Leanne, please go check her out. She's wonderful. She's also got kind of a blend between alternative folk and soul, and I just really enjoy that combination. She's a fantastic singer-songwriter. Next up, I've been listening to India Ari, and she is considered, I believe, more R&B. She has some really good recordings of some more throwback kind of songs like Georgia on My Mind, and India Ari is just a person I could listen to all day long. Next up, I've been listening to a lot of Lauryn Hill lately, and this came about because my husband and I watched Sister Act, and I had actually never seen Sister Act before and Sister Act 2, so I don't know how I missed that, but I somehow did. My husband and I were also watching some documentaries about the 90s, and Lauryn Hill is mentioned in that documentary, and so it put me on this rabbit hole of listening to all of Lauryn Hill's music, particularly this album, which is one of her famous ones. Lauryn Hill was famous for being a female rap artist who also blended soul and reggae together, and she's just really important to the history of R&B and soul and rap, and also female voices in this genre. So definitely go do some research about Lauryn Hill because she was a really important artist in the 90s. Next up, I found this great Australian artist. Her name is Fatay. I'm actually not sure how to pronounce it, but I love her stuff. Very groovy, very funky, very soulful. I was literally just walking around my house with her songs stuck in my head because they're just really catchy and memorable. And then the last person I'm going to talk about who kind of fits in the genre and also kind of not, but I've been listening to a lot of Stevie Wonder lately. I don't know why I started listening to a lot of Stevie Wonder. I don't know, I just did. I came across some tracks of Stevie Wonder when he was a kid too, some of his really, really early stuff, and it's just really interesting. I think musicians who started as children are definitely very fascinating to me, but most people know who Stevie Wonder is, and you probably know what his music sounds like, and he's just a lot of fun to listen to. So I really love a good cover band. So this next genre is not really a genre, it's just people who have been covering things who I really like. Scott Bradley's Postmodern Jukebox is an entirely cover band project, and they take pop songs and then they spin them into like old 30s, 40s, 50s style. So they do some really, really creative things musically. Lately, they released an all 90s album, and that was just a lot of fun to listen to. I have seen these guys live a few times, and they're just so much fun live too. So this is definitely something you should check out because I think they have something for everyone. Even my dad, who's not really into music, really enjoys this band. When I showed him this band, he was very impressed. So I really think everyone can appreciate some things they do. They put out a lot of music. This next artist is someone I've been listening to since January every month. I always put her on my monthly playlists. She's been pretty consistent for me all year, and that's KINA GRANNIS. KINA GRANNIS does some really good covers, and she also has amazing originals as well. She's a singer-songwriter. She's very mellow. She's got more of like a mellow folk sound, and I just adore her. Her voice is just angelic. I adore her music. And then the last cover band of sorts that I'm going to talk about is Pomplamoose. I learned about Pomplamoose because I have a friend who's a bassist, and he actually got to play with them on their newest track, Latch. So I have a friend named Chris, and he's the bassist on this track. I haven't explored Pomplamoose as much, but I've really liked what I've heard. They do a lot of really unique covers, and again, kind of like what Postmodern Jukebox does. They have a very strong funk sound, and I really love that. I love the main singer's voice too, and they are very creative in their covers. Next up, I'm going to talk about a couple of female artists who are more in the pop, folk, rock blending genre, and actually one of them is a little bit more like, I would say, even bluegrassy. There's a lot of bluegrass influence in it. So one of those groups is Joseph. They started out a little bit more pop and folk and a little bit more mellow. And lately, they've definitely been exploring more of a rock kind of sound. So really have been enjoying them. They had a new album, I think, in 2019. And another person who I have been revisiting, I actually listened to her a long time ago, and then I kind of forgot about her. And so I've been rekindling my love for her, and that's Sarah Jaros. Probably said that wrong. We're just gonna call her Sarah for now. But Sarah is a folk singer who also, I believe she plays the banjo, and she writes all her own songs, and she has a very strong like bluegrass kind of flavor to her songs. I love her voice. I love her songwriting. She writes very reflective songs and kind of more on the sad side too. It's just perfect for that like country folk vibe. The last singer-songwriter I'm going to mention is Lauren Daigle, and I'm really late to the Lauren Daigle train. I don't tend to listen to a lot of modern Christian bands, and she's definitely considered in the Christian contemporary genre. I don't usually listen to a lot of it, even though I like some of it, but I find a lot of the bands these days sound the same. And so I've just had a hard time lately finding good Christian artists who are not following into a very like radio processed kind of sound. And Lauren Daigle reminds me of Adele, but like a Christian Adele, if Adele wrote Christian music. But actually Lauren Daigle's voice is even better than Adele's, in my humble opinion. And I love Adele, don't get me wrong, but I think Lauren Daigle does what Adele tries to do, and I think she does it a little bit better. Lauren Daigle's definitely not a newer artist on the scene, it's just that she's more new to me, so I'm really glad I started listening to her. All right, next, we're gonna talk about only instrumental music from here on out. So I'm a big classical music listener, and I enjoy listening to soundtracks as well. So let's start with some soundtracks that I've been liking lately. So back in March, I watched The Witcher, and I became a little bit obsessed with the Witcher soundtrack. I really enjoyed how The Witcher used some songs in the actual show with the minstrel character, and he also adds a lot of humor to it. So I decided to just add the whole soundtrack to a playlist in March and had a really good time listening to it. There's one other soundtrack that I was listening to lately, and that was Frozen 2. I'm not a big Frozen fan, but I really liked the music for this newer installment of Frozen. I love Into the Unknown. I don't care who you are. It's a good song. There have been some newer releases in the classical genre lately that I've really been enjoying. I've been listening to a lot of violin music lately because I am trying to learn the violin. I'm very, very, very far away from actually being good at the violin, but I've been listening to a lot of violin in the hopes of being inspired to practice. I found a violinist named Daniel Hope, and he has this album called Belle Epoque. I also found a violinist named Andrew Haveron, which I only found him because I love the Korngold violin concerto, and he had a recording of it that was pretty good, so I've been listening to that album. I also found a really good album by the Danish String Quartet, and it had some kind of like hymns and folk music recorded with it, and I really enjoyed hearing those recordings. I also found a really awesome British cellist, and he's very young. He's new to the classical music scene. He won some competitions, and so he got some recognition. But his name is Sheku Kame Mason, and he's a fantastic cellist. He has a new album out. Through listening to the Danish String Quartet, I also found Sean Shibe. I think he's part Japanese, but I probably said that name wrong. But he's a solo classical guitarist, which it's very difficult to make it as a solo classical guitarist. I don't know if you're aware, but you have to be really good. There's a lot of guitarists in the world, so you have to be like amazing to make it. And so he's definitely amazing. I'm a flutist, and I'm always looking for other flutists to listen to. I've been listening to a lot of Marina Piccini. She's an excellent flutist, and she had some more modern albums that I was listening to. If you're interested in more like modern classical music and more contemporary music, this album is a good example of what's kind of out there and being written. A lot of people, when they think of classical music, they think of like Mozart and Beethoven, and people don't realize there's a lot more things that are currently happening in classical music, and there's a whole genre of contemporary classical music. So it's definitely not for every listener. There's definitely some interesting experimentation that goes on in that genre, but I love it because I'm a super music nerd. I also discovered a pianist named, I'm gonna butcher this name. I'm just gonna tell you right now, Vikinger Olafsson, and I've been listening to his Debussy album. He has a Debussy and Rameau album, and it's actually, you know what, if you guys are doing the I Capture the Castle readathon, listen to this album, because I know one of the bingo card challenges is to listen to Debussy. So there you go. Listen to this guy. And then the last album I'm going to talk about today is a Jazz at the Lincoln Center album with Wynton Marsalis. Jazz at the Lincoln Center is basically an organization that is trying to preserve American jazz. If you don't know this about jazz, it's not really surviving very well. I mean, it has a following, but like when I was in college, there were tons of jazz clubs you could go to, and now those jazz clubs are all closed down. And it's really sad because jazz is such an amazing genre of music, and I love jazz, and it's sad that there's very few places you can go and see a jazz live unless it's like a big place like Walt Disney Concert Hall or the Lincoln Center. Anyways, this was a cool album. It's a throwback to 50s jazz, so definitely check it out if you're interested in that kind of thing. Those are all of the musical artists that I've been listening to in the last 3 months or so. Let me know down below what you've been listening to lately. Do you listen to music while you read? Do you listen to music while you exercise? How do you consume music? And as always, give me some recommendations for more artists that I can check out, because I will always take music recommendations of literally any genre. Don't be scared about that. I will listen to anything. Thank you for watching this non-bookish content video today.